There is a distinct difference between Old Testament theology as portrayed and known by the Jewish nation and the Old Testament theology in light of the New Testament revelation of Jesus Christ. The people of the Old Testament did not have the writings of Peter, James, and John. They did not have the writings of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They didn't have the writings of Jesus and the letters of red. The only thing that the Old Testament writers had was the voice of God as he moved through the power of the Holy Spirit upon men and women, boys and girls, on a daily basis. They didn't have a Bible. They had the Jewish laws, the Torah, and then they had the writings of the prophets whenever the prophets decided to write down the prophecies. God would literally tell the prophets, write this down, give it to the people. You, as a Christian, have the best of both worlds. You have not only the Old Testament, but you have the New Testament. You have the Old Testament scriptures. You also have the Jewish understanding of the Old Testament scriptures if you were to do your research. But then you have the New Testament and the New Testament understanding as it is portrayed in the early Christian church and in today's generation. And you get to put those things together to come to an understanding. They had prophets back in those days. These were spokesmen for God. And if you were to look at the book of Exodus chapter 20, this is the announcement or the pronouncement of prophetic utterances from the mouth of God through the man of God to the people of God. And it's in Exodus chapter 20 that you find this right when God is now giving the 10 commandments. Now, what you will note, just a little information, what you will note is that God wanted to speak to everybody. He didn't just want to speak to one man to give to the people, but the people requested it, and he said, well, they requested a good thing. So if you go to Exodus chapter 20, there is a parameter marked around Mount Sinai. Animals can't cross it. People can't cross it. The priests of pagan gods have been warned that God is not like the other gods, and they shouldn't cross it because they haven't been given the ability to enter into his presence, because he's not a pagan god. He's the God that the pagan gods strive to be like the Most High. And the people are literally walking in prophetic revelation. God had told Moses that the sign of his success would be that the children of Israel would worship at this very mountain, Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. And so here they are, they have arrived at the mountain, and the first thing he says is, don't come too close because I'm going to come down to meet with you. He literally tells them to cleanse the camp, cleanse themselves, and prepare, because he was going to reveal himself. And the first thing that God speaks after 430 years of slavery and enslavement in the land of Egypt, he's speaking to people who are more Egyptian than they are Israeli or Hebrew. And so the first thing he says in verse 1, and God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. He basically says, I'm supreme. You shall not make for yourself image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. And he begins to spell out to them the 10 commandments. And he's speaking, y'all. He is speaking from a mountain that's on fire like a volcano. The ground is quaking. There is a vibration in the air. The Bible tells us that his voice sounds like thunder. And so there's this echoing, and they're in the echo chamber because they're only so yay far from where he is. And he's speaking to them, and they are afraid. Why are they afraid? See, there in Egypt, there was over 2,000 gods that were a part of the pantheon of gods in the Egyptian polytheistic religion. Okay, so that's number one. And one of the head gods in that religion would have been the Pharaoh, the same Pharaoh that Moses defeated through the power of God and defeated him at the Red Sea. Now, here it is, after 430 years of all these diverse 2,000 gods in this worship system where the king is the God, here it is, the people are now out there in the wilderness with their specific God, and he's saying there shall be no other God but me. Because they come from a culture where there are many gods. Even in their midst, there are pagan priests who think that they can come and offer ritualistic, paganistic, sacrificial worship to the God that they don't know. And he's like, no, you won't have any other gods before me, and you will not make any image like me. Don't use my name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day. And he goes down the list. You shall not murder, commit adultery, steal, bear false witness, or covet. And he goes through this. Listen to verse 18. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. So they were terrified. I would have been terrified too if I was standing on a mountain or near a mountain that was ablaze, thunder, lightnings, and a voice is speaking to me in audible tones telling me that I'm your God and get right. Okay. Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning. He wanted to make sure that they understood that their God wasn't like everybody else's God. And their God basically is stating in their context, I'm the God that you will serve, and there will be no other gods in this camp. The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness